Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to the Occult Explorers. I'm your hostess, Snappy, and I'm joined as always by my good friend, Dion. How are you, Dion?
Life is great. I'm breathing.
Amazing, amazing. We're back for part 5 of our Hidden California deep dive. And as always, we want to begin with our little warning. First and foremost, this is going to be a graphic episode. We're going to talk about sex, drugs, rock and roll, all of the beautiful stuff. And we want to remind you that we are explorers. We're looking at stories, we're sharing ideas. People believe these things. We're not commenting about the truth of anything. We're just trying to be anthropologists and explorers of spiritual ideas. Seeing what things are all about. So, Dion, where did we leave off last time
Oh
in
wow.
part 4?
Oh wow. A little bit of Bohemian Grove and space cults in California. I am movement. Guy Ballard. A little bit of the Chumash in the islands there on the coast, and we'll get a little more into that today too, into the islands as well, and some of the indigenous First Peoples mythologies on the coast there. So let's hit the first picture.
Yeah, like the last one was pretty wild with some of that Bohemian Grove stuff.
Yeah, so trigger warning. You might have fun too. Here's Jack LaLanne. You've ever heard of Jack LaLanne?
I have heard of Jack LaLanne. I know him from like those late night infomercials selling juicers, but I know him as a lot older than this.
Smoothies. The word jumping jacks was invented off Jack LaLanne.
Really?
Do your jumping jacks and drink your smoothies, and you could be 85, 100 years old, like the partner here. So Jack is very special, and that's his wife on the left there. Amazing. I remember seeing her after he passed away at the age of 95 on a television broadcast, doing push-ups on her fingertips at 95.
What a queen. My God, yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah. And what makes Jack special is I remembered him doing something, he would do it as a kid. He started this tradition. I remember they were saying on his 85th birthday, he would swim to Catalina while pulling boats by his teeth with his grandchildren. That's how he would celebrate his 85th birthday. You think I'm making this up, huh? Let's hit the next picture.
I mean, it sounds incredible. I mean, but I do remember him being notorious for doing crazy feats of strength and stuff. Or at least
there he is right there, because he did his jumping jacks and drank his smoothies. And there he is pulling by his teeth a boatload, a bunch of boats. His wife, grandkids. And you notice they're wearing
like
jackets.
40 people in that train.
Yeah, they're wearing jackets because it's cold. It's very cold. The water's cold. He should get hypothermia. He don't care. There's sharks. He don't care about that.
This really reminds me of the previous episode when you were talking to us about the Chumash mythology. Wasn't one of their important spiritual rites they had to paddle out to these islands, and they still do it to this day?
Yeah. It's
very similar, isn't it? Isn't it the same islands? Or
this is part of the island chains. Yeah, and he would swim out there underwater, and like I'm saying, pulling 14 boats by his teeth at 85 years old. So if you're watching this and you hear that, don't let nothing get you down in your life. I'm just saying, if old boy could do that, like what's stopping you from accomplishing that little something you want to do out there? Just saying to anybody, if you see that, eyes to hear, the eyes to see and ears to hear, that's Jack LaLanne. And he's swimming to Catalina, which is a special little island there. And you notice in the background is the Queen Mary.
Yeah, the big boat with the 3 smokestacks.
Yeah, fuck the Queen Mary. I'm gonna go on Jack LaLanne's boat to the island. So let's hit the next picture. And that's Catalina Island right there. And that's what they'd be swimming to. That's the most prominent landmark you would see swimming from the coast there to the island. And that's called the casino. But not for gambling. It wasn't for gambling. Casino doesn't mean to gamble necessarily. This building that was built, and the architect planned it to be very special. It has a movie theater in there, and that's where they had the first talkies. You know what talkies are?
Yeah, your first motion pictures with speaking, right?
Yeah, yeah. Before that time, pictures were black and white, no speaking, and you would have a musician in the audience, like on an organ, would play along to it, and that was the live entertainment. This is the first time they had talkies, and it had an amphitheater design for that. So much so that what Cecil B. DeMille, Meyer, Metro Golden Mayer, all of them, they would go to the island on yachts to preview their movies in this fancy
Wow.
movie theater. Yeah, this is where they would have the little premieres out there on the island. And it also served as a form of defense, civil defense. All the inhabitants of the island could live in it in case of a storm or emergency, or if there's war or something. And it was prepared with up to 2 weeks of food as kind of like a bomb shelter as well.
Well, it's also, it seems like it's it seems like it's in a cove that all those boats can be protected to. It's like this little thing out in the middle of the ocean, right?
Yeah.
Kind of secured away.
And
Interesting.
Catalina is the closest one at 22 miles, but that's still a long ways to pull a boatload of by your teeth out there in freezing water.
22 miles? Wow.
And the water gets so choppy because that's part of the legends is that Sir Francis Drake was searching for the treasure because he was out there capturing ships. The English and the Spaniards were battling in this region right here around these islands. And so there's legends of them stopping to bury a lot of treasure from the Spanish Armada. So much so that later on, even relatives of Sir Francis Drake got the diaries and led expeditions to the island to try to recover it. There's even modern little specials on it now.
Of course there is. I'm surprised that History Channel doesn't have some TV show with 38 seasons of a couple of guys all checking out a sinkhole looking for treasure.
Yeah, they do. They do. And this is part of the places they come.
Because I know they have shows like that. I just mean, do they have one here yet?
Yep, they do. And so it's a special little island, Catalina. And this is called Avalon, if you know what Avalon is in mythology.
Oh, yeah, Avalon, that's the island in the mist. That's where King Arthur goes.
Yeah, exactly. And so we'll hit the next picture.
It's where the golden apples are. Oops, there we go. Oh, and yeah, and I think 22 miles, that's like 35 kilometers for our non-American friends out there.
That's right, which is most of the rest of the world. So here's this picture of Ralph Glidden. He had a creepy museum there, the Skull Museum on Catalina Island with thousands of skulls. So much so that the Tongva natives had to eventually reappropriate, or when you get back your
reparations.
Yeah, they wanted their skulls back so they can give them a proper burial.
Oh,
but
wow.
He did find, and what he talked about in the newspaper clippings back in the 30s was giant skulls, elongated skulls, giants, and as well as there's modern day Tongva. There's only 8 descendants of the tribe on the island today still living. And one of them on YouTube, he does videos and talks about the legends of these giant Indians with elongated skulls, red hair, red beards.
That's amazing. Yeah, you had mentioned that in the previous episode when we were talking about the Chumash, and our friends of Occult Explorers will know that both elongated skulls and redhead giants, this is an ongoing theme we see across the world, from the Greeks to the Anishinaabe to now the Chumash, and the Tongva.
And not to interrupt you, but with elongated skulls, there's 2 different types. Let's break it down 2 different ways. There's head binding or head boarding, where you take 2 planks tied together in a baby skull when it's soft, and it'll shape it in its curved shape, our code head. But it doesn't change the cranial capacity, mind you. It's just in a different shape. There's still the amount of volume of brain capacity in there, just grows in a different shape. Now, with true elongated skulls, they grow naturally in that shape. And they have a bigger cranial capacity with the bigger brain. And it doesn't take much percentage for the brain to let's say how much percentage we use in our brains. And if you only had a percentage or two more, what would happen? Just throwing that out there for people that understand that. And so they did find elongated skulls in the other islands as well. But one reason I did want to show you the Glidden Museum is there's another picture. Let's go to the next picture. And that's what he talks about, something very special. And this is the urn that he says is the urn he found. And so he said in one of the burials that he uncovered was a Tongva princess buried in the urn, a child, in that position. Remember the Turner Ranch? We talked about that before in the Mojave Desert where they found the children.
Yeah, all the children who had been sacrificed. You said hundreds of them.
We don't know what it was. Well, when it was those 17 mummies, and they were holding their ears and their heads in this weird position with all these strange beadwork facing the Mojave River. And in this one, the princess is in the same position with the beadwork. And there's a circle of 50 children buried around the urn, all facing towards the princess.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it was in a 1930s newspaper clipping. You could Google that. It's a pretty interesting thing. And so he uncovered wild stuff, but he did it in a bad way, an untasteful way with people's relics and artifacts. But he would just go out there and go crazy and just find things.
This is unfortunately the story of a lot of early archaeology and anthropology. It was very reckless, to put it mildly.
Oh yeah.
We had mentioned in the previous episode where that guy had actually blew up the ancient site of Troy. He found it, blew it up, and then discovered an even more ancient site and thought that was Troy.
Right. Yeah, people will blow up stuff. That's part of what they do, to destroy, looking for gold, looking for money, looking for treasures. Treasure comes up in a lot of our episodes. That's what people are looking for when we're digging up the past. Are we looking for treasure? Or are we looking for knowledge? That discriminates or determines what we're looking for. So, all right, let's hit the next picture. And so, when I was talking about the beadwork, there with the Chumash and the Tongva, it made them the most prosperous Indian tribe in California, Southern California, the Chumash, due to the abalone. Abalone is?
Yeah, it's that special type of seashell. It's basically treated like a semi-precious stone.
Yeah.
And, because it has a very beautiful, translucent, sort of like turquoisey, pink, purple kind of color.
Yeah.
I love the stuff.
And so, because they had an abundance of that, and they could eat that as well, and a bunch of seafood and stuff on land and at the sea, they were a prosperous tribe because people used abalone as a form of money back then. And shells as a form of money. And they had a predominance of that in their landscape there. And so it made them a very prosperous tribe, trading with all the other tribes of California. And some of them, the other tribes, lived in the desert and really had nothing. But in this part was special right here. And you see the islands up in the green there. These are the Channel Islands where the Chumash would go out to and paddle out to, we talked about.
Right.
In their mythology, they talk about something called the Rainbow Bridge. You might have heard of the term Rainbow Bridge before.
Yeah, so we have the same thing in Norse mythology, right? The Rainbow Bridge to Asgard. So that's like a common motif you see in a lot of different mythologies. There's also some South American theologies that talk about rainbow bridges as well. But yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Well, in the Chumash symbolism, supposedly their creator puts them on the island, and they have no way to get off the island to the main part of the land there, and so apparently the creator creates a rainbow bridge for them to walk across to the mainland. And as they're walking across, some of them fall into the ocean and they become dolphins.
Oh, interesting.
We did an episode on dolphins before.
Yeah, there's so much with dolphins, right? Dolphins go deep.
Oh, definitely. And then when you cross over from that Rainbow Bridge, right there where it says Ventura is where a lot of the Chumash ancient city is. You know, I've been fortunate to go up there behind Hidden Valley. You can Google Hidden Valley and Balancing Rock. Let's hit the next picture, which I had showed before. We'll go deeper into it because this is like the epicenter of their city up there. And this is overlooking on the mountain chain that overlooks the islands there. And it almost looks like a Buddha's head, some people will say. And around this whole area is petroglyphs and where they would have had set up, you know, the Chumash kingdom. Hit the next picture, and so you could get that's the same rock, just so you can get a perspective. That's someone on top of the rock there. And that's the mountain chain overlooking the islands. And so
they definitely would have marked this for sure, you know.
Oh yeah, it's very special, the whole area up there. And I remember when the guy took me up there, and this was before pre-internet, you know. So they're like, well, the Native American elder had brought them up there, and my friend said, you should come and come see this. And he goes, there's a whole, and you won't know what's there unless you know how to hike and get up into the mountains there. And on each side of the mountain chain where the houses are $1 million homes now. So it's hard to have access up there. There's only certain ways to get up there, but it's this part is public though, right here. It's in public hiking grounds of Santa Monica mountain chain. So, that's you know, and I recommend if you're in California, you should check it out there, because not far from there is also Rocketdyne in St. Susanna Field Laboratory, where Werner von Braun and that nuclear reactor, and that's where they built the rockets to go to outer space into the moon and everything, and in the middle of the Chumash sacred grounds. You know,
it's so wild, and like you were showing in the previous episode, they even built that military base to launch the rockets directly on top of petroglyphs of the Chumash.
And what's sad that in 1959 the nuclear reactor melted down, and so now there's a ring around the area there of cancer. There's a cancer map showing how many people have got cancer, and they're building public parks there, and they got to clean it up. It's a bit of a little lawsuit thing in California right now going on there. You know, that's called the St. Susanna Field Laboratories and Rocketdyne Aerojet. You know, deals with that Jack Parsons stuff, Werner von Braun. This is where the UFO cult stuff really takes shape. So let's see the next picture.
And like we know that, you know, Jack Parsons is one of the most influential people in terms of the UFO cult. He was one of the first massively public figures to blend the science fiction world into the world of Thelema, right? Aleister Crowley and that kind of occultism, and really inspired a lot of people in his wake that gave birth to a lot of these UFO religions, you know? So this is ground zero for all of that, right?
Well, here's a special rock, San Luis Obispo, which is just right down the street from there. This is another Chumash sacred spot. We'll hit the next picture, put more in perspective, we could say. It's like an oval or an amphitheater. You know, that shape we talk about.
Again, always the horse hoof or the heart or whatever. Like you see the same kind of shape everywhere, and and like you pointed out, it's always the same shape as the theaters. You know, the sacred spaces for Dionysus.
And this rock is special, Chumash rock, called Painted Rock, California, San Luis Obispo. Hit the next picture. Boom. That's how big it is.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to show a couple of pictures to put in perspective. You would go in there and all the Chumash would line up around it. And inside had the world's biggest petroglyph.
Oh, wow.
Like it went around for I think it was like 40 to 80 foot painted mural.
That's incredible.
And they would do
that
ceremonies
entire big thing, like an amphitheater.
Yes, you know, a natural amphitheater.
Painted. Can you imagine what this would have been like in the Bronze Age or in the Stone Age? Like, it would have been incredible.
And people would be having ceremonies there. And it was painted. It was, right now, all the paint, the ochre has washed away. But that's what we're going to talk about, is that ochre and pigments. Wow, what's the word now? Polychrome, monochrome. There's a certain feature where it reflects these natural pigments. And they found that their artwork deals with Datura. Now we're going to get to the ceremonies. Yeah, okay, so they would do Datura. And the Datura would produce a type of a shine or radiance around people, an aura, electric aura. And that's what part of the art reflected. And there's lots of articles. You can type this in, type in Datura and Chumash, and you'll see lots of articles about the psychoactive cave art or the rock art. You know, let's hit the next picture.
And like, we know that the Datura was a big part of many different indigenous societies all across North America and the world, right? Like,
they love Datura.
And the shining thing is a constant with the Datura. Anyone who's experimented will tell you about that.
Oh, I mess with those tryptamine, or what do you call it, atropine?
Yeah. No, we don't recommend that anyone do any of the true hallucinogens or the what do they call it, deliriants. That stuff is extraordinarily hardcore. You really got to be doing that with a well-seasoned alchemist who's got a nice antidote prepared for you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, and antidotes is part of it. You know, and some of the other herbs they took was poppies. Because California poppy is the state flower. It's on the flag.
Oh, beautiful.
And they had an abundance of those there. So they had Datura and poppies, as well as tobacco. Now, you know about tobacco's use amongst indigenous tribes, and a lot of people would smoke and smudge with it and use the smoke as a kind of purification. Well,
and the snuff as well. You know, there's a lot of use for it.
Well, Chumash had a whole different way of taking it.
Oh,
here's what they would do. Remember, they're on the coast there. They would take the mollusks. We talked about mollusks before in previous videos, like say in Tyre. We talked about Melkart and Heracles and the dog finding the purple mollusk on the beach, and them using that dye to make the purple robes, which is also psychoactive.
You know?
Yep, and it's psychoactive as well. And in certain interpretations of biblical texts, you'll find the hero of the story's mouth is stained purple from cunnilingus on another character in the Bible.
Right. Or the purple anus for all of our fans of Ammon and Carl Ruck.
Yeah. So there's other mythologies with these mollusks. There's histories of mollusks, as well as in we talked about the use in Judaism. The blue mollusks were used to make the sacred blue in the robes, you know, and that was down at Ashkelon in Israel.
Yeah, major Phoenician center, you know, that is a site of Aphrodite worship that we talked about in our Aphrodite episode, if you want to go back and get the whole rundown on that stuff.
And there they had the mollusk dye pits they found, and they were processing the mollusks for psychoactive and colors and dyes. Well, the way that Chumash used the mollusks was they take these mollusks from the coast and they would heat them up in a basket until they get sizzling hot, like turn bright red, and then they would pulverize it into an ash. Then they would mix the tobacco with that, and then they would make it into cakes, and they dry these cakes.
That's so interesting.
And then when it was time to take it, they would take the cake and put that into the licuado and take it. Now, a few minutes later, they would induce a vomiting. And after the purge, they would feel relaxed, have that little buzz going. They would have an appetite for dinner. That's how they took their wacky tobacco, with those mollusks.
That's so interesting. I've never heard of that kind of imbibing. Not a lot of tobacco ingestion, because like you said, it causes purging.
Yeah, that was part of the... No, they would do that in the afternoon.
Mm.
And then they'd be ready to eat dinner and get them all buzzed, get a nice little buzz going.
That's wild.
You know? And so back to the rock. That rock that we were just looking at, here's a zodiac painted on the rock. Here's different glyphs that are painted around it that connect to the different constellations, Virgo and what have you.
Amazing. Yeah,
Yeah,
they got the whole entire zodiac mapped out, all 12 signs. Wow.
it's an
And all of the major.
observatory. It's an observatory. Chumash astronomy.
Amazing. That's
Remember,
incredible.
they're building space stations on top of these spots here. Now, let's hit the next picture.
Gosh, the guys who are drawing down the stars, and now people 1,000, from a different culture with modern science are also drawing down the stars.
Mm. So here's some of the art of the Chumash. And they'd be on, mind you, datura and poppies and some tobacco. And they talked about first peoples. Like, we talk about the indigenous as the first peoples, but they talked about people before them were the first peoples. The star beams and spirals are a part of it. I want you to see that spiral in the corner there. That's that Chumash spiral that's used to calculate the stars, which we'll learn how and why. And that tree at the bottom, that's a tree stump, and on the tree is the what is it? California or North America's oldest arbor glyph, not a petroglyph, but an arbor glyph. That means onto a tree.
You were showing us this last episode, and it's another star map as well. Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm going to show you how it works. Now go to the next picture.
And I just wanted to comment. I love that wheel web imagery with the eye and the sun. Like that is, oh man, you see similar symbols around, but that's really, really cool looking.
So that symbol on the tree could be used like this. And that's like a pencil there just to illustrate. But they would have a spear or an arrow. And remember, that's the same way Muhammad would calculate the Hajj when they would do call to prayer, and he'd use the sacred spear. And we got spear of destinies. We got
all of the stuff we used to see at Delphi that you were telling us about, right? With the threshing floor and also the sundial, right? A major important part.
That's your jet pillar. That's your Shiva Linga. That's your maypole.
Yeah.
There's different ways to look at the totem pole. Now, this would calculate the reflection as it would move across. Now, the length of the shadow was timed per eclipses and solstices. I mean, the solstices and equinoxes, and the length of the shadow. So that glyph, they would take a spear in front of the tree and the shadow onto the glyph on the tree, depending on the length and where it was moving across that symbol, acted as a map. Timekeeping. To the untrained eye, you just think that's, oh yeah, look at the neat little image, the weird scorpion or whatever they called it.
Yeah,
the scorpion.
It's kind of vaguely humanoid blob thing. What is this?
Yeah, no. They would put a staff there, and depending on the shadow, the length and the moving would determine different coordinates. Remember, we got latitude, longitude, as well as the equinoxes and all that, because they kept time to that stuff. They would do all their stuff as seasonal. They're hunting, they're planting, and they're into acorns. A big part of it was the acorns from the oaks.
Oh yeah, we still keep some of this. Like, I don't know if you guys still do this, but up where I live, it's a big hunting culture. So you still get a lot of the traditional hunting names. Like, August is sturgeon. The month, the second lunar month is called in August is called the month of sturgeon, because that's when you would go out on the lake to hunt sturgeon under the sturgeon moon. And every month has one of these names corresponding to the animal or the plant that was in abundance at that time that you would go out and get.
Love it. Love it. So let's hit the next pick.
All right.
Oh, got that off of Google. That's somebody, because they even actually put the coordinates off of Google Maps for you. And that is...
Yeah, that is a Google Map image that you sent me.
That's the wheel at Mount Shasta. That's a giant formation on the ground. And inside that is smaller wheels as well, with stones. These wheels, there's also a place called Black Butte next to Shasta. And so people talk about this is the entrance to the city, the hidden cities there, and all these different UFO cults. Well, the native tribes had different ceremonies and different astronomical rituals. Here's some of the images of it. And you could type that in the Mount Shasta wheel. You know what? I'm showing you images of the wheels as well because it's part of the. Some of them look like the Strophalos wheel, like which is used in Hecate. That's Chumash has one that's identical to the Strophalos.
That's amazing. And you know, this stuff also keeps making me think to prior episodes we were talking about with all of the occultism around oranges and the orange sun and Nazism and the swastika also being a wheel symbol or an idea of the four seasons and the spinning sun. Like these images we're seeing are all kind of somewhat interrelated. Like I'm not saying the Chumash are connected to these Nazis, but the Nazis are watching what the Chumash did and are reflecting.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they set up shop on top. They put the rocket base on top of their spot. They incorporated their symbols and mythologies. Yeah, they're keeping track. Let's hit the next pick, and we'll talk more about these mounds and circles in Mount Shasta.
Yeah, and people should go back and watch the previous episode because Mount Shasta is one of the most important sites for the modern New Age movement. It's the birthplace of the I Am UFO cult, and it spawned a lot of different groups who are both looking for UFOs or also a lot of people looking for what Dion had alluded to, the inner Earth. You know, which is a whole belief that there's another planet with its own solar system, its own sun existing below the inside of the Earth, and you get access to it through Mount Shasta. But
yeah. There's caverns there. There's caverns.
Yeah. You showed us the guy from I Am had his religious experience in those caverns where he met that blonde-haired, blue-eyed alien from the Pleiades.
Oh yeah. Well, there's another thing in the Shasta area, which is thousands of mounds, these circular mounds on the ground. And some of them have stones around them. It's not, how could that be natural? What if it has a stone ring around them? When you go down and look at it on the ground, it has stone rings.
Right.
And there's
we're just
thousands of
seeing
them.
the weathered and kind of forgotten remnants of what was once a giant maintained pattern.
Yeah, and people will ask the question, "What for?" And it's very interesting. That's where you have to watch one of those Ancient Aliens History Channel videos, and they get into Mount Shasta mounds and circles too. But the natives knew they were there, and the UFO researchers know they're there. Those are the two people who look at them. And this is just up the street from the Bohemian Grove. There, this is Northern California. And since we're talking about Northern California, and we talked about Southern California, I thought we should talk about Central California, which is where the state capital is. Because I haven't mentioned that at all yet. So we could hit the next picture and we'll get started there. Yeah, we're there now. Now we're in Fresno. Have you heard of Fresno?
I have heard of Fresno. Whereabouts is that in relation to like some of the bigger cities? Just so I can
think about Sacramento. So Sacramento is the state's capital, Central California. This is the farming lands.
I've been to Sacramento. Sacramento is beautiful as a city. Everything kind of descends onto the main Capitol building. It's really interesting.
Yeah. Well, in Fresno, which is outside of Sacramento, there was a gentleman that came from Sicily at the turn of the century, Baltasar Forestieri. And he took all of his savings because he wanted to build an orange grove. That was his life stream. He came here from Italy to build his magic orange groves here. And when he got here, he got the perfect land, multiple acres. And when he went to dig, he found out that he couldn't dig. There was some type of stone.
Oh, no.
That was like just a foot underneath the dirt. And the dirt looked perfect on top, but then you get down, there's this stone level. And so his life's dream is ruined, but he has all these acres, so he has to become a day laborer. So finally, he remembers back home in Italy, they had basements, like cellars for wine cellars. And he goes, well, I can build something like that. That'll be cooler because it's very hot out there in Fresno. It's like a California, how hot it is. And since he couldn't plant his fruit trees, he started digging down in the ground. And he realized that once he got past that stone stuff and went down to the ground, he put planters and started planting his trees. And he built up, it is on 10 acres of land, he built a system of corridors of tunnels, of rooms, of parlors, over 10 acres. Some people in modern day Fresno that bought houses later on, they have some of his rooms are underneath their houses. So like, yeah, one of his rooms is underneath my house. Like, and they board it up. It goes on for 10 acres of tunnels. And he would build planters for citrus trees. Let's hit the next picture. And so his orange tree at the Forestry Underground Gardens, there it is like that.
That's amazing.
It's the California's oldest orange tree at 100 years old, still producing fruit in the desert environment, you know. And like I said, he would go down and plant. And at one point, he grafted 7 different types of fruits onto his main tree. And he had hundreds of these trees all over his property. And people would finally come over and come to his property. And he turned it into like a spa place, you know, where people could come and stay. Over 10 acres of corridors and underground tunnel system, you know, because there's so many tunnels in California, from San Diego, Carlsbad Caverns, to the Mojave Mitchell Caverns, to the Shasta Caverns. They're all over, you know, these tunnel systems. And the oranges as well. Since I thought I'd throw in some orange stuff, since, you know, we've been seeing the oranges in the previous episodes, like the Brotherhood of Eternal Love, founded in Orange County, California in the 60s, made orange sunshine acid using military precursor chemical ingredients from the military station or base down the street there, and spread out to the kids at the park at Haight-Ashbury.
Right. And through their industry plants like Frank Zappa and Jim Morrison.
Yeah,
right?
well, yeah, no, their parents were military intelligence. So I figured we might as well talk about the governing structure of California itself, the state capital. So let's hit the next picture, and we'll put it into perspective. That is the state capital of California when they're building the Capitol building in a Masonic ceremony. Like you've seen the ones that back in 1776, this is like 1920.
The Masons are always around, like you were showing us when they inaugurated that school.
yeah. That in California, the 20s was a big Mason time, like where it was all open and doing ceremonies, and the whole infrastructure is Masonic.
Interesting.
You know, and underneath that Capitol building is tunnels, hidden staircases, and a whole bunch of hoo-ha as well. Like the guy who built it, he ended up in a mental institution. They locked him in the mental institution. They didn't let him finish the building of it. Like, let's hit the next picture. Yeah, there it is, the California State Capitol. And all that stuff aligns, just like Washington, D.C., with their symbols and the whole thing. You know, the Bohemian Grovers hanging out there. You know, and so during this time period, you know, I've talked about the Brown family.
Yes.
Different times.
From Werner von Braun to the Browns, who were some of the first governors of the state of California.
And the architects as well. Samuel Brown did the stuff for the World's Fair in San Francisco. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the governor's family. Let's hit the next picture. And that's the Brown family. So there you go. So that's 1963. That's Pope Paul VI. And that's at Castle Gandolfo in Italy. At the castle, not at the Vatican. That's at his private castle. He has a private audience with the Browns. And so on the left of the Pope is Pat Brown, Edmund G. Pat Brown, who was the governor. There's his son, Jerry Brown, who became the governor, who studied to be a Jesuit priest as well. On the other side, you have his wife and his daughter. And his daughter went on to become the state treasurer of California, Kathleen Brown. Very special, powerful family there. With the next picture. So that puts it in perspective. Private audience with the Pope. There's Castle Gandolfo. That's the only image out of California I'm going to show you. That one is special because that's where the Pope hangs out when he's not at the Vatican, at this castle. And you see the domes there? Those domes are part of the Vatican astronomy program. That's where the
Oh,
telescopes are.
wow.
You know about the Vatican astronomers.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So this is where it's at his summer residences, where Castle Godolphin, where the Browns came and had a private meeting in '63, where he was being tapped. He was going to run for president. Pat Brown was going to run for president. President Brown.
And if you're going to run for president, you want that papal money, that papal support,
Yeah.
you know.
And what happened? What changed things? And we'll go to the next picture, and we'll put it in perspective. Well, so he's governor, hangs out with the Pope at the private meeting. He's going to run for president. And all of a sudden, this dude hits the scene. Ronald Reagan, the cowboy, the actor. And before Ronald Reagan tried to become the governor of California, he was already the president of the SAG-AFTRA.
Yeah.
He was already helping them fight for wages. And I was like,
This
what?
is
He's already president for the movie stuff?
So, like, I have a personal kind of, like, deep hatred for Ronald Reagan. I honestly think that, it's hard to say, but modern presidents, he's definitely the worst in modern times and responsible for so much of the crumbling of the American system. And that he's the demon who woke up the evangelical movement, because largely the evangelical movement was not politically aligned. They were more invested in other things. But with Reagan, you get that marriage of conservatism and the evangelical movement that has just wreaked havoc across North and South America. And it really begins with Reagan and his neoliberalism. And also, without Reagan in Canada, we had Mulrooney. Mulrooney was a Reagan clone. And in the UK, you get Margaret Thatcher. It's like the triple threat of neoliberal, just divest. The worst. Anyway, sorry. Well, and he used that SAG-AFTRA stuff to pretend that he's like, I got union cred. See, I'm gonna protect the workers, and then cuts everything. Like,
yeah. Oh, he cut a lot of the budgets for the school systems. That was one of the platforms he ran on, was like, well, you have people over there at Berkeley, they're anti-war. We need to get rid of that anti-war movement, get rid of welfare, get rid of all the different things. And people will always, in the conservative movement, will talk about, we need to take it back to when Reagan was in power. That's their big fantasy world they live in. When Reagan, they'll bring that up, when life was perfect. Well, this is how it started, though. He comes out of nowhere. He's tapped, just like this dude was tapped. Pat Brown was going to be the president. He's already the governor. And he's like, really? They're going to put an actor against me? He even made fun of him. He didn't think like, oh, this dude can't win. Reagan won by a landslide and became the new governor of California in the 60s. And there's more to the story. Hit the next picture.
Yeah, Reagan does mark that transition, right? He's one of the first he's one of the first people to become president that didn't have a political career in modern times, So yeah. It's kind of wild.
Bohemian Grove, that's how. There he is at Bohemian Grove with Nixon, who he was running against. I mean,
who's the gentleman standing up between Reagan and Nixon here?
I forgot who it is, but they're all power brokers. These are all the richest people in the world at their German drinking club of mirth and hijinks. And Pat Brown, mind you, is one of the spokespersons for Bohemian Grove. If you type in the word Edmund Pat Brown in Bohemian Grove, he even spoke in Congress at a panel on it, because women were suing the Bohemian Grove at a certain point of like, why can't women, that was their end, was like, hey, you're discriminating. And he spoke at the thing, Pat Brown, the governor's like, the former governor, he's like, oh, well, if there was women there, we couldn't walk naked. We walk around naked and we bond. And he even said, what's going on? He's one of the spokespersons for the Bohemian Grove, is the Brown family. And though, they had the meetings. They told him, nah, you're going to have to step down. We have to put Reagan as president. And so we're going to fast track him. He's going to take over as governor. You're going to have to step down as governor. He's going to be governor. and then go to the next picture because it's also weird. Yeah. So that's him. He gets put on as the president, and he's all, but I'll be president, but I'll let your son become the new governor. So Pat Brown meets the Pope. He's tapped to be president. At the Bohemian Grove, they said, no, we're going to switch. We're going to put Reagan. Reagan becomes the new governor of California. After that, his term, then he goes in to become the president. And he goes, when I step down from governor, your son can take over as governor. And that's Jerry Brown, the Jesuit priest, right there.
Talk about insider trading. Holy shit.
Yeah, this shit's all set. And so, yeah, go to the next picture and we'll just see who Jerry Brown, like, this will put it in more perspective. Oh, there he is with Jim Jones.
Jim Jones. Friggin' the devil himself.
Yeah, no, this is a PSYOP. California PSYOP. CIA all over it. You know, and I feel bad for all the people that died from this dude. You know, the Kool-Aid.
No, I think, you know, there's a lot to be said about that. A lot of different people, you know, I'm putting on the tinfoil hat here, right? But we're occult explorers. We listen to all these various ideas. But there's a lot of speculation that people like Jim Jones were specifically designed to cast shade upon the Jesus movement, which was an outbreak of the hippie movement that was specifically anti-war and somewhat leftist, and the burgeoning Christian communist movement, you know, all of which were happening in California and were becoming quite radical at that time. And it just so happens that Mr. Jim Jones is a star figure of both of these movements, who unites these movements and convinces 10 or at least a couple hundreds of people to go with him to Guyana, one of the most jungle countries on earth. You know, if you were going to try to disappear, Guyana is the place you go. Like,
there's no disappearing. That's bullshit. The disappearing, they chartered planes to go there through the government to take these people there. This is a government situation. And what's funny, Redwood Valley, where he had it all set up there, I was living down the street from there, like literally like a couple houses down from the temple years ago. And it's not too far from the Grove.
Right.
It's all connected up here and up there in the valleys there, Redwood Valley. And you know what's funny? You know, talking about the communist thing, I'll go back to Reagan for a second. When he was the president of SAG, he testified to Congress about communists in Hollywood. He outed actors that were communists. That was his thing. Like, he went up, he said, I think this person's a communist, that person's a communist, and they're a communist. And he spoke, and they're like, and they gave him some medals and things. And what's weird, that's how he met Nancy Reagan, because she was originally on the list of communists, and she came to him and said, no, I'm not one of the communists. He goes, oh, well, you're kind of cute. And they hooked up. And that became his wife, Nancy Reagan. Now, Ronald Reagan also was involved there at that military base, Lookout Mountain up in the hills, where Jared Leto now owns where they used to do the propaganda films for the military base and the training videos. Well, Ronald Reagan has done over 400 military films besides his acting career, because he was tapped early on to be part of the military. It was something called the Military Entertainment Bureau or something. And then he would do films for the military, over 400 of them. A lot of them are up at that military base headquarters in Laurel Canyon, Lookout Mountain.
Right. It's wild. And I also just want to say, I'm like, not all anti-communists are fascist, but all fascists are anti-communist. So when you hear that kind of dog whistling, it should turn your head, you know, because maybe this person is actually the worst kind of extremist, you know?
Right. No, he was already up to hoo-ha in Hollywood, becoming and taking over things and being politically charged with secret societies from the get-go, you know, 100%.
We see where the Reagan movement is leading, right? With their Project 2025 and Trump, which is, they want a fascist dictatorship, a Christian fascist dictatorship. Their main goal is to remove 2S LGBTQ plus people from public life. have them vilified as child abusers, and then ban pornography and use that to attack any dissonant for and
Yeah.
that's they're explicit about it right now in your country. It's freaking insane.
No, and politics are tied up with the cult and the American mindset. The whole connection, it's so deep. I don't even vote. I already know. I know better. But let's hit the next picture. Let's go
Right.
deeper with these folks. Yeah, there he is right there with the kids. And he would appeal to a lot of the African American community. No, he was smart. He was a whole plant. He was very smart. He had money and temples, and there's a temple in L.A., San Francisco, Redwood Valley.
This is always the thing too. Anytime you see blending of ethnic groups where they're starting to come together as a social cohesion, the FBI's got to come and fuck it up. Anytime you see, these religious kind of communities like this, the FBI's got to get involved. And we know that they're involved. The question is like, did they set them up? How much? It's so wild.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's all set up, and they did the Kool-Aid. They talk about the Kool-Aid. Next, we'll talk about the applesauce. You know about the applesauce?
No.
That's Heaven's Gate. Yeah, let's hit the next picture.
Oh yeah, Heaven's Gate. That's the other. Oh my gosh. Yeah,
Marshall Applewhite.
And the mother.
That's his arrest record in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Before people were committing suicides and having their cult going to outer space, he was already causing problems. He has a problem childhood. His father was a preacher, and he wanted to be an opera singer. And he eventually joined the opera there in Houston and was teaching. There's pictures of him teaching opera classes, and he had a manic break on stage one day in front of everyone at the college and had to be hospitalized in a mental institution. And he woke up to Nurse Bonnie.
Right.
Nurse Bonnie Nettles. Bonnie Nettles right here. And she's the real leader of the cult now.
Oh, yeah.
And he woke up to her and she said, "No, you're cool. You're a prophet. I'm your prophet wife, even though you probably don't like women. I could be your wife." And
it's almost
are you familiar with the castration? Not in a positive way, because we talk about castration for the goddess, are using your body as an art piece or an edifice to the gods or goddesses. His trip was different. He's like, nah, to join my Star Trek cult, everyone has to be like uniform. Look, we have little short haircuts. They were neutered, not male or female, just non-binary, little Star Trek outfits, little jumpsuits.
Yeah, when I've looked into this, and a lot of it really reminds me a lot of Gnosticism. Okay, and a lot of they're celibate. They're engaging in neo-monastic practices. A combination of Eastern and Western stuff, New Age stuff, Christian stuff. This is the thing. The group is taken from everywhere. Heaven's Gate. They have a very kind of loose theology. Like you said, it's based on the oracular stuff of the guide, but really Bonnie was the one who orchestrated everything. And really, when things turn wild is when she dies of cancer.
Yeah.
And then he becomes unhinged. And that's when, like, they want to overcome sex, and they have all this talk, like the Gnostics, of overcoming the body and overcoming materiality and becoming beings of light. And part of this is like they have this extreme frustration with their sexual urges, which you see in a lot of these monastic groups. And so they encourage people to commit castration, and it just starts to ramp up from there. But I'm sure you have some stuff to add.
Well, they had set up shop in New Mexico at a certain point, and then they come to California to a place, Rancho Santa Fe, which is a very nice little bougie spot outside of San Diego right there, overlooking, the nice coast. And they wear their little Star Trek outfits, like little Nike, little jumpsuits, and it's uniform. Everyone has the same outfit, the same haircut, no sex.
Yeah, they all become non-binary. It's very explicit about it.
Yeah, and she dies. He becomes unhinged. He becomes biblical. at that point. And then what he says is Halley-Bopp comet. When at its closest point to Earth, he's like, we need to connect to the comet. We'll beam up. And so they do the applesauce.
Yeah.
And they went out in stages. They didn't all die at the same time. They did 3 stages, 3 waves.
There's a really good Netflix documentary on this. There's even, I think it's 2 or 3 of them that decided to stay behind to be chroniclers of the passage. They still maintain their website.
Yep. And it's weird. I'm going to, and it sucks because it was the biggest mass suicide in America.
Yeah.
And this is California. This is a cult that's blending Native American mythologies, biblical Christian mythologies with UFO, L. Ron, I am stuff. And this is what you get. Star Trek.
This is something we constantly see. This is like a very kind of human phenomenon. And I want to just put this into perspective, okay? Not just in religions, but we see this in a lot with religion and spiritual practice, where it becomes a one-upmanship of being more pure than the other person, about engaging in extremes of behavior in order to show that you've overcome the body, you've overcome life. Like in India, you see this often. You have these yogic masters who are trying to outdo each other. A famous way that this happened in the past is like in China and in Japan, where monks would actually turn themselves into mummies, as through a slow process of suicide. But again, it's about this extremification, about where the group becomes insular and they're constantly encouraging this more intense behavior until it just gets out of control and people are doing just the most intense things imaginable, like mass suicide. I mean, we even see it in popular forms of art. Like I think of the black metal movement in Norway, where kids constantly one-upping each other until they start burning churches down. What started out as having fun playing rock music turns into some kind of one-upmanship craziness until people wind up getting thrown in jail and dying. It's like very human and sad.
Well, they were already thrown in jail 20 years before this suicide, and they're being monitored by the government. And not too far from there are military bases. So just saying, in California, there's a lot of overlap between the military entertainment complex and the occult underground world. Let's hit the next picture. Show you one last thing here. Remember, like and subscribe, share, comments, all that good stuff for the Occult Explorers. We were earlier showing you the Chumash whales and the Strophalos whale, the whale of Shasta up there. That right there, that's Jim Jones' symbol. That's for the People's Temple. That's their whale. Their Strophalos, their wheel of Hecate. And up in the corner is the symbol for Heaven's Gate. And it has a little stars there. At the bottom, it says away team. That's like what the astronauts have. That's what you were in your little patch. They put that little patch on you. You got your little jumpsuit, and boom, take the applesauce and some phenobarbital vodka, and boom, you're ready to go to the comet.
Yeah. No, it's so sad with a lot of these cults, and like in seeing all of the interconnections, it's even more shocking. And like going back just to Heaven's Gate, something like Heaven's Gate, like the FBI are monitoring them and we're actively trying to encourage members to leave. But because they were a non-violent organization, that they didn't practice, like they weren't like a lot of these more intense cults. They weren't holding anyone against their will. They were mentally manipulating people through community, and through practices like shunning.
I like that. Mentally manipulating people through community.
Right. And that's how a lot of this works, right? Like, how does Jim Jones get hundreds of people to drink poison? And we have accounts. These people didn't just die. They're crying and screaming, and they're watching the person next to them die in agony. And they're doing it to each other and to the children. Like it, the power that these community social pressures can put on people is just unimaginable, and we need to, as a greater society, pay attention to these things.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well said.
We'll leave it there. We went a little bit dark with this, but that's the thing with a lot of this occultism and new age spirituality. It's both good and bad. It's the best of us. It's the worst of us, right? It's a human enterprise. So like Dion said, like and subscribe. Make sure you share, buy us a coffee, support us on Patreon. Come talk to us on Discord, Myth and Lore. Any last words, Dion? Do you want to leave?
Have a good week. Enjoy. Join us again next Sunday where we'll explore more underground esoteric topics. Have some fun with y'all. Keep your head up. Stay blessed. Have fun.
All right, everyone. Peace, love. Hail Satan. Till next time.